a couple of times I don't like being touched, or I don't like being exposed, and that means I don't like my skin on show, sort of thing. I don't like when I say I don't like being touched. I think for a long time I didn't understand why. I just thought I were odd growing up and stuff, and I didn't like hugging as in your families and stuff like that, and I didn't like that. But yeah, no, I don't like being touched, being hugged or anything like that. And I don't like being touched, I don't know how to say it, but sort of by myself, either my body touching my body. I have a real dislike and really big hatred of my inner thighs touching, and that's been there all the time. It's just, and it can go so I'll always like wear shorts or trousers or tights.
And that's because of being raped as a child. You dislike that?
Yeah, all I know is that I don't like that area touching. I don't like the skin on skin feel there. I think that's one of the bonuses that I found when I was significantly underweight, because I had a thigh gap, and it was like brilliant. My legs don't touch, and you know, I thought that was a good thing, because I hate like just the normal, like when you sit down and stuff like that. So that's one of the things links in with what kind of clothes I wear and how I go to bed. Like I'd never wear a nightie or anything like that. I always have, because your legs might touch accidentally no matter what position I get in, because I curl up in bed into a ball. So I'm all really close, so if I had a nightie on, my skin would be touching.
What about under your arms, when your arms touch?
I don't like that.
Right, that's
yeah,
the skin as well.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't like, but it hasn't got as much hatred. I've got to admit, it hasn't got as much hatred and as much energy as my thighs.
Yeah, so that's why I referred to it as when you were raped as a child. There's no hatred in that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I like I say, like when I go to bed, I always wear my underwear. I never take my underwear off. I wear pyjamas. I have to have my pyjamas tucked in. I've got a thing about my lower back being exposed or being not feeling safe. I like to wear, like I've got loads of layers on today, but I'll always have one on which is really close to me, like a vesty type thing, which is, so I need to feel secure.
Comfort skin that you don't like your skin being exposed? So for safety you put a guard on your skin, is that what you're saying?
It seems to be.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't like, if I like put a baggy top on without like a vest type of thing underneath, I don't like the air and the space and the openness.
Because it's getting in.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the fear of somebody getting in. So,
yeah.
So when you spoke about your back being exposed, and when you discussed having the operation and you've got the little like chip thing that's been inserted in your back, can you explain a little bit more about that? What was that like then to be exposed and that part of your back being exposed? Because I'm aware that has significance for you as well.
Yeah.
And so then, because somebody was doing an operation because of the damage that the rapist did to you, how did you manage that?
It's in a society where the society's sort of like built that it's okay for random strangers to touch you or expose yourself. Many situations, whether it's at the airport, at the doctor's surgery, if you get arrested or whatever, anything like that, you're meant to be okay about being strip searched or being patted down or being exposed, or we'll just do this examination. And
what if you're not okay with it?
Well, luckily, because I'm not okay with it.
But in some situations, even if you're not okay with it, it's going to happen anyway.
When I get my other thinking brain on, and I can get really quite worked up about that I'm gonna get arrested for something that I haven't done, and what if they want to search me, and what if I get caught at the airport, and I go into overdrive sometimes, thinking about the possibility of having to be exposed, having to be touched, or having to be examined.
So the very people, as we, from what you've just said, builds a whole new picture, because the very people that certain things might have happened to them as children, that they've suffered traumas and they've been in an unhealthy environment, are reliving their unhealthy lifestyles. And so then when they go into society with that, then they're going to be further triggered by a society that's going to, not intentionally, but do exactly the same thing, where I can touch you whenever I want, I have rule over your body, I'm not really interested in what you're saying, and especially those that, say if somebody's taking drugs, they're self-medicating for their addictions, and there are lots of addictions that we do, even when we don't know workaholic or things like that, and we think, oh, that's a pat on the back because I've worked really hard.
It's a good work ethic, isn't it? And it's something like that.
Reward, and so that's the thing where, we normalise things in society, but it doesn't mean that society is healthy. But because we normalise it, we deem it as that's healthy, and well, no, it's not. So lots of these addictions to food, as you're aware from your addiction, or addiction to Coca-Cola and sugar and sweet things and things like that. All of these are self-medication, so that from addictions that we have, it's not just about alcohol and drugs and things, all of these things are. But if you take some of them, if you medicate, if somebody else medicates you, a doctor, then that's okay. But if you medicate yourself, you can go to prison for it, because we can give you this drug, but this drug we've legalized, so then you're going to go through this being touched, being your rights taken away even further, that might have already been taken away from when you were a child. So we're not going to look at the root cause. We're just going to look at the action and the reaction.
But even though when they do know the root cause, society's built to, don't mean ignore it, it doesn't accommodate it. Because I was watching a documentary which put fear of God into me, because it was about prisons and women prisons, and like I say, I get paranoid about everything, sticking to the rules, because I don't want to do anything wrong and I'm going to get into trouble. So one of the things is I'm going to get sent to prison for something I haven't done. And I was watching a documentary about a women's prison, and they actually said on there that a large percentage of the people in that prison had experienced abuse as a child, and sexual abuse and trauma and all that kind of thing. I thought, oh, that's good that they've actually acknowledged that. And then the next clip just showed them, and when they come in, they get strip search, and it were like these women would just get in off van into first office, and they were like expected to take all your clothes off. Well, that sent me not in a good place.
And I guess why it did that is because for you, your amygdala's always lit up, so you're always looking for dangers, and that's why people get interested in. We can be very easily brainwashed if we're in fear, because we then start to look for the dangers so we can make ourselves safe, or that's what we think. But the more danger you look for, the more you're going to feel in danger, then the more danger, and it just becomes more and more and more.
It's like I'm always on alert for when am I going to be in a situation that I'm going to be uncomfortable with.
Exactly.
I'm always preparing myself for,
So it's like when it was COVID, and it was a constant, and then the more people got more stressed and more stressed and more stressed, because it was a constant. It was similar to what all the billboards and things that were around, be safe, and all these things. To be safe must mean you're in danger. There's all these signs around, and the very, when we was in that, and I was looking, and I thought, this is what Hitler did. He put lots of signs around to tell to tell the Germans that they were better than somebody else. So it's like, wow. And this is, why do we need all this? Why do we need all these signs? Our natural instinct lets us know when there's a danger. Why do why do we need to be told this so much? If we knew there was a crocodile on the loose, if we knew that, lots of them, our instinct, we wouldn't need a poster, we'd need to be told once. And our instincts, but if we knew as a virus there were millions of crocodiles on, we wouldn't need to be told to keep ourselves safe. We would just naturally do our best to keep ourselves safe. We wouldn't need to hear about it all the time because we do it anyway. And so we wouldn't be having parties and things like this, and doing all the things. It's like our natural instincts, but we're rendered almost stupid sometimes. That you think, then why are all these signs being put around? Why are these people now being grandiose and everybody else is just normal, or and these are superheroes almost? Why is that when there are people saving lives every day? So it's how we are. It's how we tend to do things to say, look at me, or look at this, or look at that. There's always some sort of message going out, but lots of them that keep us looking, messages of fear. Yeah. And I think so that's what you've done.
Yeah.
You've gathered information up from prison, and you're not likely to go to prison because you're not a criminal, and you live in fear that you wouldn't dare do anything anyway, and yet you're putting yourself through something for something that would never happen, or your egoic thinking is. Yeah. So why is it that you do that?
I don't know, it just takes a mind of its own, and it becomes...
what does that mean? It takes a mind of its own. Who is it? If there's one of you in there, then who
it's
is
that
it?
voice in my head. It just...
So the internal dialogue, which is the egoic program.
Yeah, it gets very loud, very... sort of like chaotic, with lots of thinking about things all at once, and going to looking at things in the worst case scenario, or what would be the worst case scenario for me, because going to prison and being locked up wouldn't be a worst case scenario, but somebody wanting to do an examination of me would be. And so my mind goes, I'd say, off on one. It just goes on a little journey on its own quite rapidly to what would be my worst case scenario, which I thought, going back to what the question you answered me right at the beginning about when I had the operation, I had an operation where I had wires put through my spine to my bladder, and because my bladder the bladder nerves had been damaged when I was little, which meant I've had bladder problems in my adult life. And I went to got referred after a lot of years. I said something to my GP, and they referred me to urology, and I knew because they'd probably want to examine me because it's a bladder problem and stuff. And I made it very clear that I don't get touched, and nobody's even looking at me or anything like that. I don't exposed. And I made it clear that if they couldn't help me, I was quite happy them discharging me. I didn't want to waste anybody's time. I'd live like that, because I would rather live with the issues than have somebody like look at me or examining me or anything like that. They actually referred me on to somebody else, a different trust, because the trust where I live couldn't accommodate that. So they referred me to a different trust who, when I first saw the consultant, because at that point I couldn't say the words or the experience, so I gave her a piece of paper with it written on, and I said to her, if you want to discharge me, that's fine, I don't want to waste anybody's time. Which went, no, we'll work with you. And so they tried different ways, non-invasive ways, to try and sort of like reprogram my bladder, sort of thing. So medication, but even down to acupuncture and things like that. And they had a minimal impact, but then it was like, right, they're not having a good enough impact. It's, affecting your quality of life. And
what was that like for you to hear that this is affecting? They were careful.
I would just brushed it off. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I'll live with it. I'd rather live with it than not be touched. And
So
I'm very blasé about it. It's like, no, it's not a big deal because it's normal for me.
But that's it. That's what I'm saying. You normalise you not being a big deal, and but this was the NHS, and these people in the NHS were treating you really well, and yet you brushed yourself off, and so, what was that like for people to say no, that your quality of life isn't good enough?
It was a bit.
In a good way.
It was a bit bizarre, as in, oh, this is new. I expected to be turned away and said, oh no, because you won't conform to what we can offer you,
right,
and that kind of thing. And
so is that based because of your past experience? So this one is a new experience that you're saying. It's about the people as individuals that treat you well. Yeah.
The surgeon who I spoke to, he was the one who's putting in the wires. So there's wires going into the lower back of my spine, and they put like a battery pack implanted in my bum, which needs recharging and goes to a key ring and is programmed on a computer and stuff. And it's like it regulates my bladder nerves. And I have had a lot of issues with it. It's taken a couple of years to find the right program for it to work, to not be in considerable pain and such, but my symptoms have improving, and it's like finding the right there's about 25 programs, and it's finding the right one, and I haven't found the right one, and this, that and other. But the surgeon was really, in my experience, really different to everybody else, as in he listened to me, and I was like, but if I have an operation, and that's all I was bothered about. I wasn't bothered about the lifestyle change that I'd have to have. I wasn't bothered about not being able to drive for a long time after it, or this, that and other. I was more bothered about, when I have the operation, can I keep my underwear on in theatre? And every time I saw him, that's all I would go on about. And he was just, yes. And because he knew how significantly important that was to me. And before they do this operation, in the guidelines that they have, they are supposed to do a certain number of tests before to prove that the operation is going to be viable and that kind of thing. And he actually went to the funding people and said, I'm not putting her through those tests because they're too much for her. But I still think it's worth funding the operation and giving it a go.
So isn't it nice that, he went, kind of looked at you as a human being and not the tick box.
Yeah.
And actually said, so it was, like I said, the individual. Yeah. It was important.
And the funders listened to that.
The funders listened to that.
Yeah.
And said
and
yes,
so I went
well.
through I was able to have the operation without having the preliminary tests that people normally have before it. And in theatre as well, he came to see me before the operation, and he was like, can I tell the theatre staff your concerns about being exposed, as I say? And I'm like, yeah, because I don't want anybody like trying to take my underwear off me or anything like that. So I'm like, yeah. And in theatre, the anaesthetist and this male nurse were the nicest people I've ever met.
Oh, that's so nice.
Because even when I had an epidural, and even when he was doing it, he's like, you are totally covered in your back apart from this one bit where I'm sticking the needle. And when I'd had the epidural and was like lying on the bed and stuff, even though I couldn't feel anything, this male nurse kept, because there was a delay in theatre, he kept coming and telling me, I know you can't feel it, but you are covered up. You are all right. And just that reassurance. And because I couldn't check because I was laid on my front, I trusted that what he was saying was true, that I was covered up. And to me, trust don't go hand in hand.
The fact that you saw a female at the beginning and then there were males, what was that like? That, you can trust men? That they are, there are men out there that are kind and lovely people?
I think, it sounds awful, that it's like I clump everybody together. I know it was a male who when I was little who abused me, but I've just put everybody together and don't trust anybody. Don't matter whether they're a man or a woman. It's like I don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it as oh, I don't want to see a man. The therapist I had before you was male. It was, I see everybody as just people. Don't like people. You know, that's been my mantra since I was a kid. Don't like people, don't trust people, don't want people, don't need people. That kind of thing. So I've never been gender biased or unconsciously biased towards a gender because of that. And I know some people do. It makes people a similar experience to mine might make somebody quite, you know, against a specific gender and stuff, but that's not been my experience. But I was just like, wow, people are actually like listening to me, but actually doing something with what I've said, not going, oh, we've listened to you, but we're just going to carry on doing as normal procedure. And it were really enlightening for me.
Yeah, the difference for you is when people treat you as you don't matter, and that these people treat you as you matter. And so it's not about really where you work, is it? It's about the individual people, that individual people can treat individual people like human beings. And unless we go into this program that we've got of ticking boxes and this is how you do it, and
well,
ignoring ourselves,
earlier on in that day, being admitted to the hospital, when the nurse came round to do my so this is the same day she came round to do my admission. So it's all about your date of birth, and a tick box. Do you drink? No. Do you smoke? No. Do you self-harm? Yes. Do you exercise? And she just went on to the next one. And it's like, I've said yes that I self-harm. Why have you asked me that? If you're not going to do anything about it, what's the point? You might as well not bother asking me it. Or even question, in what ways do you self-harm? You're coming for an operation now. Do you feel safe? Are you at risk or anything? I just found that in the same place on the same day, two very, very different responses, and that's down to the people.
And again, it's asking somebody, do they exercise, and it's what's the meaning behind that, because you use exercise as a punishment. So we can use anything as a punishment, you know, like I told you the story of the knife. And so, you know, you can use anything as a punishment, really. And so then it's like you say, what's the meaning behind these questions? What does it mean if you exercise then? What does that mean? Ultimately, what's the backstory to these questions? And what is the backstory? Are you interested in the backstory? Or are you just interested in ticking a box?
In that, I felt it was ticking a box.
Does that person then make of this tick box then? If somebody else were to read it without the backstory, then they would add a story to that from someone else, because we make stories up all the time, just as you do about going to prison. So it's like, what's the meaning behind these stories then? What would you do with that information? What does it mean? What do you need that for?
Yeah, because there were no inquiry about anything. It felt just as a tick box. But the treatment that I received from the surgeon and the team around him, I were like, it were really quite weird for me, because I felt for one of the very few times that I was like being heard, because somebody was actually doing something with what I'd told them about. And I know it might seem that I'm not willing to change it, that I'm not going to be touched. I do try sort of like try and see how far I can go with it, and I get to a point where it's like, no, I know I'm not going to be there. I do try and push myself to challenge these things.
Who are you trying it for then, when you say, I don't, you know, I'm not going to be touched, I do try?
I think I'm going to be judged that you're not trying, you're not.
But why do you have to try? That's unless you want to for you. Why should you, have to try to please others? Because your body, people that don't want to be touched on, they're exposed and all these things. We're reacting to an abnormal situation. That doesn't mean that you're abnormal. It means your environment's abnormal. And we've normalised our abnormal environment. We've normalised bad behaviour, insulting behaviour, not only towards ourselves but towards everybody else. We've normalised, the nastiness that comes out of our mouths towards ourselves or others. We've normalised this kind of behaviour. Does it mean it's healthy? No. If you have bad thoughts, will bad things happen? Yes. If you have good thoughts, will good things happen? Yes. It's very simple. And yet we normalise these things because, we normalise this chattering voice in our head, this internal dialogue that you like the name of. But what is it saying, and do you think it's talking to you? Because how you express it is, when you said, at the beginning, it was almost like an it. It's like, well, who is it then? And then it was a you. So it's like, how many people, there's only one person in there that this, and yet this chattering voice that we have in our head, when you listen to it, you realise it's not you, because you're not saying, this is what I'm going to say tomorrow, all day long, chatter, chatter, chatter. It's like, even if you're walking down the street and you see a tree, it's going to start describing, oh, look at that tree, that's quite strange, I haven't seen a tree like that before, that flower's nice. It's like you're running commentator all the time. Your internal dialogue goes on and goes on and goes on. You already can see the tree, you don't need to be told. So it's remembering then that if you didn't get up and decide to say all these things, when I walk past a tree, I'm going to say, look, that's a tree. Do you see what I mean? Then it isn't you. The other thing, when you listen to it, it's actually just playing back events that you've experienced. So what it did for you when when you watched about the prison, it recorded those things that you were interested in, or the things that you wouldn't like. I wouldn't like that happening to me, and it recorded it. And then what did it do? You played it back to yourself, and then you lived it as if it had happened. You told yourself a story from it. So it's like, it's make-believe.
It does feel as if there's like loads of people in my head talking.
It is. It's recorded the people in your environment.
But they're all at it all at the same time. So
exactly. So it's your ego and your super ego all having a conversation, and it feels real, because you get a feeling. You think, oh well, it must be true because I've got a feeling. It's like, absolutely not. If somebody told you a joke and made you laugh, you'd have a feeling. But does it mean the joke's true?
No.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just made up. We can think an awful thought and have an awful feeling. Like you had a thought and a feeling when you were watching the picture about being in prison. Yeah? You had a thought and a feeling about being touched. So your body might have reacted to that. Or sometimes when people tell themselves a story about being afraid of spiders, they're afraid of spiders because they have a story behind it. So when they talk about, they go like this. It's like, wow, there's not even a spider here that we can see, and yet you're going like this. It's like, so does it make it true? Well, for you, in your made-up story. And then if everybody's doing this, and the majority of the planet are making stories up, then what can be real then? How do we know what's real if people are constantly making true what they believe? And it doesn't matter what, like I've said before, it doesn't, as a human being, not a human doing, not a human with a label, that we, as I've said on the other videos, that we have these labels and think I'm a, and then we're like I'm a, and we think that we're grandiose or whatever because we have a certain title, but we're not really that. It's just a label, and the job's made up, and your title's made up. Somebody made that up. Like we make names up. We make them, we make language up. They're just noises that come out of our mouths, really. But, And we say this is true and that's true and that, and I believe that, and I believe that, and I believe that, and I believe that. If it was true really, every single person on the planet would believe the same thing.
Mm.
So it's all made up. And yet, you believe it.
Yeah.
You listen to this voice, and then when it's wrong, does it ever come back and say, do you know what, I'm so sorry for saying that in your head?
No.
Exactly.
It doesn't admit it's wrong.
No.
It doesn't.
It's always right, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's always right about other people.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's grandiose.
And if it is wrong, it uses it. That's because next time's going to be a bigger fall.
Do you see what I mean?
It used to say with exams, when I were doing exams and stuff, I used to say, you're going to fail this one, you're going to fail this one. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be relieved. I wouldn't think, I'd be thinking, right, it's done that, because next time you're going to fail even worse, and it's setting you up for a bigger fall.
And you've just captured it yourself. You said, I wouldn't think. Because you're not. You're listening to the recording in your mind. You're not the one that's playing this recording in your mind. So when you're saying, I wouldn't think, it's like, then who are you that wouldn't think?
Mm.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that can be quite difficult to separate yourself from the egoic voice, but the egoic voice that's playing is the one that's your puppet master. This is your prisoner, and it's everyone else's prisoner that listens to it as well. So, and it's the one that makes our lives miserable, if we believe it, based on our life experiences that we've experienced. And so what yours is repeating to you is that you can't be touched. And because behind every can't be touched, you will have an experience, and then you'll be able to tell me a story about it. And
even if there isn't the voice saying you can't be touched, it's somewhere. Because even when I think, like, sometimes when it's bedtime, I can't get changed, I can't do the process of taking off my clothes and putting my night clothes on, because there's that in between where there's some point there's going to be some elements of your body exposed. So sometimes I will go to bed, but that's not because there's a thought saying, oh, you can't be exposed. It's just that feeling, I don't feel comfortable taking any clothes off at the minute. I'm just going to bed like this, and this is all right.
Exactly. So this story goes on even when you're on your own. Yeah. Number one, and it gives you a feeling in your body. So you say, well, it must be true because I've got a feeling in my body, but your body's recorded it, because this is always playing in the background. Such as when you spoke about getting in the bath and you just dunk in and dunk out, and that's part of.
So in those situations, what do I do? Do I go, right, do I force myself to get changed?
No,
or do I just go, accept that I'm just going to bed in my clothes?
It's not about forcing yourself or anything like that. It's about listening to the voice and saying, it's the separation, realising that if you're not the voice and you're not, it recorded an horrific event by a child rapist, it recorded that, and that's over now, it's not happening to you now, but you keep recording and listening to the experience. And so the triggers are in the environment of, this is what I won't like, but they do it over there, and this is what I don't like, and they do it over there, and this is where people treat you bad, and they do it over there. So it's all those recordings, and then you get triggered, and then you respond to it. So you're responding normally to keep yourself safe to these abnormal environment experiences that you've had throughout your life. So when you recognise, do I really need to respond like that now? If I'm in the house on my own and I'm safe, do I really need to respond like that? What did I do yesterday that caused me harm? Nothing. And the day before, nothing. And the day before, nothing. But you're missing all those days where nothing happened, because this story comes with you. So, and you keep listening to the story and believing it, rather than challenging it sometimes and saying, you know, if I allow the feeling of being exposed just a little bit, as much as I can bear, not forcing yourself, and you take charge of what's going on. This is your house, this is your body, yeah? So you take charge of that and say, okay, bring it on. And then and that's the same for any uncomfortable energy or what we name it, anxiety or things like that. And so that's what you do. You just say, I'll just try a little bit. When you do that, you're out of the soup. But when you're in the feeling, you think it's you, you've dropped into the soup. So it's staying above the water all the time and saying, I'm going to look at this feeling, but I'm not going to be in it. And that's what the difference is. Yeah, I'm going to look at the soup, but I'm not going to be in it. And I'm going to just try that for a little bit. So I'm just going to, when you try it, you do it outside of the experience. So what you do is you say, today I'm going to challenge myself with that and see, just see what it's like, and I'm just going to watch the feeling in my body. Because whether you do what the body, the story tells you to do or not, the feeling will go, but you've just not given yourself the opportunity for that. It's like when people stop smoking, it feels extremely uncomfortable. So, when I stopped smoking, it was very uncomfortable, but I knew that discomfort meant it was working. Yeah? And then eventually the discomfort went and went and went and went and went, gone. Yeah, so it's that. So it's like it feels uncomfortable, or when you have anxiety, it feels uncomfortable. And sometimes you can catch yourself in it and you think, oh, I went into there, but now I've popped out again. And that's from practicing by doing it when you're not anxious and just inviting the feeling. It's not going to be as much as it would be, but you've got the skills then, you're practicing the skills with it. And it's not giving up on yourself. Because we can easily go back and say, no, it's not giving up on yourself.
It's finding that balance about, not just accepting and settling and not move and not trying to challenge, but not going from one thing to other. It's doing it at a pace that you can cope with.
Yeah, and it's doing that.
Because I know some days it's like, right, I'm going to go do this, and it's like, because I think I should be over here, and that's where I see normal people are and stuff like that, going around hugging people. I don't even let my mum hug me, and she goes, give us a hug, and I just stand there like a plank of wood going, please don't touch me. So it's like, I want to be over here, I'm over here, but I've got to get steps to it rather than just sometimes going, I think I'll do this. Because my mind does do that sometimes. I think it'll be a good idea just to jump in, and so it doesn't work.
It's imagine you've got a horse and cat, and sat next to you is the egoic thinking. And for the majority of your life, this egoic thinking, it's had the reins, and it's been driving you down all these roads you don't want to go down, and you're sat there saying, I don't want to go down that road. Well, we're down it. And we're going down that road again. Yeah, we're going down that road again. And again, and every day you go down the same road that you don't want to go down. And because you're letting it hold the reins, and just sometimes you might just pull the reins over and say, whose is this horse and cart? It's mine. It's not the ego's, and I've been letting you drive. So I'm going to take the reins now, just for a little bit. And for a little bit you might be a bit wobbly and, it feels a bit uncomfortable me doing this. I'm not used to doing this. And normally I'll just sit back and let the ego's awful story take me where it wants to take me, down Nightmare Street. Yeah, so, there's a place over there that looks really good. I'd like to try there. And it's like that. When we believe so much, we've got such an intimate relationship with this voice that we believe that it's who we are, and it isn't who you are.